Let's come to order. We're here tonight for what for me is the least favorite meeting of the year, the zone exemption appeal meeting. Let me say, I know we got the family members here. We take this very seriously. We look at this, we think about it, we try to think about not only what the families want, but what's fair for everybody, what's in the best interest of our system. So I'm not sure how the board's going to vote in either case, but ahead of time, I just want you to know that we do take this very seriously and try to make the best decision we can for everybody. With that, Mr. Gill or Mr.
Angel
Evans?
needs to swear in the
Okay.
families.
Would you stand, please, and raise your right hand? Each of you swear or affirm the testimony you will give tonight will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, under the penalties of perjury.
Before we get started, I just want to get everyone on the same page as far as some background here to make sure that for some board members, this is the first zone exemption appeal hearing you've been through. We have two tonight. These are the only two we've had that's requested to go before the board tonight that have qualified to come before the board. Both of these requests are similar. They're both wanting to attend Oakland High School. We'll get into the details of that in a minute. The board did pass something in March at the recommendation of Mr. Spurlock from Oakland High School about some minimum qualifications to enter Oakland for the IB program. The reason that came before the board, and actually it came before the board last summer, came in March, was a slight modification of that to make it align with the magnet school prerequisites. But the reason this came before the board was there were some high school principals who were worried that the IB program could be used for recruiting of not only athletes but also, high-performing students, and so they wanted to make sure there was some sort of admission standards, I guess, for the IB program, because there really weren't any before. So Mr. Spurlock voluntarily brought this before the board. It's in line with the magnet school, what they do, and the board adopted the most recent version in March, and that's included on page 2 of your packet. So any questions on that part of it before we get started?
Can you just remind all of us, or Harry, one, our policy is to Oakland, aside from the IB, and zone exemptions into Oakland. What's the process?
What we've done in practice on this is that if a student qualifies for the academic benchmarks or qualifications for the IB program, we let them go, regardless of what the sending principal has to say. If they don't, we follow the same zone exemption process that's outlined in board policy, which is, the principal's recommendations are looked at. The parents have to have a valid reason, those sorts of things. And by practice, typically what that means is that if both principals agree and they have a valid reason, we allow them to go. So that's how we treat any school that's not overcrowded.
The flip side of that, if one of the principals disagrees in that situation, you typically do not let it go.
We typically honor the request of the principal, typically.
We also look at see what the families say, whether they have a severe hardship, and try to judge it. It's not easy to compare those apples to apples. Sometimes. It's a case by case situation.
Terry.
I guess I'll go back before we even get started. How about before the IB program came along? What did we do?
We treated it like any other school that's not overcrowded. We did a zone exemption, and if both principals agreed to it, we let them go. I mean, they had a valid reason.
It's not. I have to disagree with you. It's not an overcrowded school.
No, sir, it's not.
So we try to get students to go there.
No, that's what I said. We treat it like we do any other school that's not overcrowded. If both principals agreed and they had a valid reason, we let them go. And we do that with any school that's not overcrowded. So, for example, Eagleville High School or Eagleville School, they're not overcrowded either, and we typically let them go if they have a valid reason, and both the sending and the receiving principal agree. We treat Oakland the same way outside of the IB program, and we've done that historically.
I have to say I disagree with you, but we'll carry on.
Aaron.
There's reference here about Oakland being an open school. Clarify for me what an open school is, and is the standing of Oakland High School still an open school, and does that take some board action to make it different?
No, sir. What an open school means in this situation is that it's not overcrowded, and so it's eligible to take zone exemptions if they meet the qualifications for a zone exemption, and that's outlined in policy.
And that is still the case at Oakland?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The terminology is a bit confusing. There has been talk of Oakland being open, which implies that anybody who wants to go there can go there, which is not quite the same as saying that we follow the regular zone exemption policy.
Campus school would be the only school that we have that is truly an open school. You know, if you get your kids in the list when they're 4, a zone exemption is not required. There's not a zone for that school. It is an open zone. We don't have any other schools that are that way. I mean, even the magnet schools have, standards to get into the schools. But it's used interchangeably. If it's a school that's not overcrowded, sometimes that's referred to as an open school. It doesn't mean that it's an open zone. It means that it's eligible for zone exemptions.
You
If
might
I-
want to think of a different term.
If I can make a comment, one of the reasons for establishing strict admission standards for the IB was because the word was percolating through all the schools that Oakland, that there could be some recruiting of athletes taking place. And true or not, I don't know, but Mr. Spurlock came forward with an acceptable standard by which you get in. But I can tell you one of the reasons principals agree or not, and I happen to agree, one of the reasons principals are given some latitude with respect to whether they sign approved or not approved is on athletes. I think they view it as it's unfair if Oakland's got 150 seats over there and they have none at their school, that if somebody can just carte blanche fill out a zoning exemption form who's a super athlete and go to Oakland High School because they've got room. Now what that does, it lends itself to recruiting. Now, it may not be the coach that's recruiting, might be one of their friends, might be somebody that's got an affiliation with the program, somebody who has a love for Oakland. But it concerns me, and in this case, we've got apparently 2 good athletes and probably 2 good students too, which is part of the reason why we said no. We've made a practice for years of making athletes go to their zone school. I know there's 1 or 2 of you don't think that's fair, but I don't think we'll have any autonomy with respect to saying no to any athlete that decides they want to up and move to another school to enroll. And, it pains me. I know one of the families out here, and I have a lot of respect for them, but I'm going to continue to recommend that we don't do this. I think it would be a colossal mistake on our part, and I think it would give Oakland, and let's face it, athletics is very important to Rutherford County Schools. I think it gives Oakland a tremendous edge and an upper hand with respect to securing additional athletes for their program.
What about and this is what troubles me, are we in a situation where we're treating athletes differently than non-athletes? Can you talk about that I mean, to me, that's the most troublesome part of this. If we're letting non-athletes go, but we're telling athletes you can't go.
Mr. Ash at Laverne High School has been probably the most consistent principal of all of them about if they don't qualify for IB, regardless of their athletic status. He's been pretty consistent in recommending that they stay at their zone school. And the reason for that is he's trying to get Laverne High School turned around, and he wants to keep his high-performing students and all those things. Right. Some of the others, the athletics have been the factor that's made them sign no.
I mean, there is a place on the zone exemption form that you mark whether you do or don't play TWAA sports. And I think probably holds true with the NC2A and the TWAA. They've got specific guidelines on where a kid goes, and once they enroll, they can't go to the other school because they want to go there. And, if an athlete does want to go to Oakland from Riverdale or Oakland from Laverne, we'd like to see a really solid reason or a hardship for their going. If there's not one, we're certainly not going to approve it. So, I don't know if I've answered your question.
I think so. Wayne?
The track record of this board over the years has been that unless there's a compelling reason, the board hasn't granted those exemptions. And compelling has normally meant some kind of medical or hardship in that manner. So this board over the last, I guess this is the 3rd board that I've either watched or served on. We've held the integrity of the lines very strictly, and so the track record has been to deny them, and the last 3 boards have denied a lot of zone exemptions for what they felt were compelling reasons.
That's a good point, Wayne. I think you're right. It's been medical issues and almost exclusively medical issues that, and even then, we haven't always agreed.
Yes, sir.
Well, if you guys like, we could.
Well, I don't want to cut off this general discussion, because to me, this general discussion really, in a way, is more important than the details of these. Well, it applies very much to the details of these two cases, but if you're ready to move to the specifics, we will. But if there's any other general comment about this issue of where we are with Oakland and zone exemptions, now would be a good time. Yeah, Tim.
I just asked the question, is it held that it's legal to do that based upon athleticism? Yes.
Well, with respect to whether you grant the zone exemption or don't grant the zone exemption, whether they're athletes or not really does not play into it. The zone exemption should stand on its own merits. If you think it's meritorious and there's a basis for the zone exemption, you should grant it. But whether the student is an athlete or not an athlete should not weigh into it.
Wayne.
The issue here is that the principal have said, a principal has said no, according to board policy, right? That's our issue is here?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I mean, board policy says that the recommendations of principals will be one factor that is used.
I mean,
It doesn't
that's the
doesn't
issue.
bind us, but
Yeah.
that's the one thing that we look at.
Yeah.
Any other, Terry?
I'll just counter that, you know, just in my opinion, you know, any principal's gonna deny it. You know, at one time, they were denying them because they were instructed to deny them. You know, I guess looking at these two right here, they're both ninth graders. It says both of them are athletes, but who's to say they're gonna even make an athletic team? I mean, and I don't know either one of them. I'll just be straight up. So,
Grant?
My zone includes all the schools involved here. Laverne is terribly overcrowded, and we been needing some relief. Of course, there's only one student, and of course I represent Oakland, and obviously we think it's headed in the right direction. But they do have some open seats, and it appears to me that this athletic phase of it is a big thing that's driving it, and I don't think that should be the only criteria, the main criteria.
So,
Sorry, go ahead.
so with that logic, if there's 17 people come in here next week, each of whom plays athletics that want to go to Oakland, I mean, are we just to approve all those too?
Not necessarily because they're athletes, but not necessarily
Okay,
because
so-
they're not, you exclude them because they are. So, you know, you can't, you kind of putting it like that, and you don't.
Well, I hope everyone at least will give some credibility to the recruiting issue, because we're the ones that have to deal with it down here. I mean, we've suspended coaches. We've, you know, we've ultimately, kids have been banned from playing because of going to where they weren't supposed to be zoned and not provided adequate documentation of that. I mean, it is a big deal for athletes and good students to go to their zone school. I mean, no principal, let's just put athletes over here for a second. These principals' necks are on the line with respect to their academic performance too. They like to keep good students. You know, I guarantee Dirk Ash wants good kids in that school. Unless there's a real hardship here, and my recollection is it wasn't a real hardship, then I'd hope they have to go to their own school. We've worked real hard over the last 8 years making kids go to where they're supposed to go to school. Mr. Blair alluded to it a minute ago. That's the reason we're only sitting down here with 2 tonight. People knows you go to your zone school. We won't reverse the trend.
Well, and I don't know what we would do. Well, we've been trying to use what the board passed in March, you know, try to stick to that, so we're, you know, carrying out the board's wishes. And I don't know what we would do in the future related to that if these are approved tonight, because it kind of negates what the board passed in March. But, I mean, we can obviously deal with that as we do it.
The question would be, if a good student, and for a principal now, it may be, it should be, and I think we have to deal in the real world, is it, but it should be more important to keep the good student than it is to keep the good athlete. But the question would be, if a student came that was a good student, non-athlete, and made a request to go from a school to Oakland because there were seats available, would they be allowed to do so? To me, that's the question.
I guess, not to interrupt you, I guess on top of that, what's the board gonna do?
I'm not sure I see where it negates what was done in March. If these students are not qualified for the IB program, then what's done in March is only related to the IB program. And so it's not really in conflict with that. They're transferring to Oakland or taking a zone exemption to Oakland without any relevance to the IB program. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the action in March, that's all about qualification for the IB program. So really, this is a decision separate from the IB program and really doesn't have any implications with the IB program.
Well, what was passed in March was there to supersede what already is in policy for zone exemptions. If they don't qualify for the IB program, then the zone exemption policy goes into effect, and we look at the principal's recommendations and whether they have a hardship stated and things like that. If we approve them, and we haven't got any specifics yet, obviously, but if we approve them anyway, then this doesn't really matter anymore. Maybe I'm not being clear about that.
I think it still matters. It means that they have to come to this hearing to get this type of approval. It just means that, you know, this is the place for that approval. It's not that we're in conflict with previous board ruling.
Well, typically, if the board approves something like this, we try to use that in future decisions so that we don't have to bring them before the board. So if the board decides tonight that this isn't necessarily, then we would hopefully not have to bring it to the board before, again, in the future. That makes sense?
It does, but I don't see that we're necessarily setting a precedent because we still have situations here where we have one principal agrees, one principal does not agree, and each of those situations has come now to this appeal without regard for what may have happened in, you know, with reference to the IB program in March. This is the correct and appropriate place for two conflicting opinions from the principals to be resolved. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to resolve that conflict. It typically resolves in denied, but they have the opportunity to come to this appeal. Okay.
Other general comments? Donald?
Well, I've been hesitant to say anything because I think the board members and Mr. Gill know that I'm probably the most lenient of all when it comes to zone exemptions. I was, when I was principal, I never refused to sign a transfer, and for teacher or student. I felt like that if people were dissatisfied, and they thought the grass was greener, then let them chew on it. Kind of the way I always viewed it. And so I think that that's a situation where people prefer, for whatever reasons, to go somewhere else. There's seats available, and as you, I think the other folks know that I would tend to go that direction. And I understand exactly what Mr. Gill is saying. I don't disagree with that. It's just that the general philosophy that I tried to operate under was that if people are dissatisfied and they want to try something else, there's seats available for them. Let's let them try it. That's my view.
Yeah. Well, I'm sort of conflicted, so why don't we just hear about the specifics?
Sure.
I would say in general, I don't want to go back to the days when we had 17 appeals. 4 of us, anyway, 5 probably remember those meetings, and that was not pleasant. And I think the way that we've curtailed that is by being a little strict, but.
And trying to be upfront. We put
Well,
on,
right.
we put on the application which schools can and can't, or, what the exceptions are, and just try to be open about what the process is, so.
Anyway, let's hear about the first case, Jan.
Sure, okay. The Wilson family is the first appeal. Michelle Wilson, you guys can come on up, please. Request a zone exemption for their child to attend Oakland High School instead of Riverdale High School. The student is an athlete, and the parent has not applied for the International Baccalaureate Program, so it is unknown whether the student meets the academic prerequisites adopted by the Board of Education.
Well, thank you all for coming, and I know it's not a real fun experience, but so I appreciate you making the effort. Please feel free to state your case.
Well, we had an older son go to Riverdale, and the first 2 years he went, he started off as an honor student. By his sophomore year, his grades had fell to C's. We had numerous parent-teacher conferences with our son there, and a couple of teachers just told us, hey, we stopped teaching for 2 weeks because the kids wasn't listening. We just gave them busy work. And for a teacher to admit that, I'm done. So we moved him, and now we want to move our other son. We went through the proper channels with the zone exemption. We got Nolan to sign off. We got Spurlock to sign off. Everything was fine. We took it to Mr. Gill, and he acted like that we signed it. And he called Mr. Nolan, and then Mr. Nolan proceeded to change his mind. And that's where we're at right now. I don't want my son going to Riverdale. I don't think academically it's a good school, and it's overcrowded. That's basically where I'm at. With it.
And like one of you said earlier, we haven't made a baseball team. I mean, my child may get hurt. He may not make the team. It's a shame. I mean, what if he was in drama or he was something else? We would not be having this discussion at all. It's all about athletes and the zoning and which school it is. I mean, I guarantee you if it, I do have one at Eagle. I guarantee you if this was about him going to Eagle, we wouldn't have this discussion. But it's at Oakland. I'm a graduate at Oakland. I like Oakland. And, I don't think it's right that he should be denied since it is an open school. And Riverdale is overcrowded. I mean, they can't help it. We need another school. So.
And I'm actually a graduate of Riverdale in '85, so.
I did have Mr. Nolan sign this on the back of the little four-wheeler with Officer Coots there. He knew my child was not in the IB program. He knew he would, it specifically states he's a baseball player. And at that time, that's when Oakland and Riverdale was playing one another. And, he proceeded to tell me that, Riverdale's grades were a heck of a lot better than Oakland's. I don't know that. And, that we've already beat them twice. And that's when I persuaded or told him, that, I had a child at Riverdale that we pulled out of Riverdale because it is overcrowded. It's very overcrowded. Riverdale is a party school. It is all about their pep rallies and for any sport. And I cannot tell you how many times my oldest son was pulled out of school to go and tarp a baseball field because it was raining. I'm sorry, but for my child to get paid to play baseball is probably slim to none, just like most of Americans' children. He needs an education. And I think he would get a better education at Oakland than I do Riverdale. And that's our point. Sorry.
Okay. Ms. Gill, you'll.
Well, with all due respect, I don't think that Riverdale's a party school, and I'm sure that the teachers there would take exception to those comments. I know some outstanding teachers at Riverdale. They've made, their scores favor are very comparable to what Oakland does, and it's not a party school. So, with respect to whether you do or don't get the exemption, I don't think that was an appropriate comment, but yeah, obviously.
Well, let's just say they have a lot of pep rallies for every sport.
Well, I'm sure Oakland does too.
Questions from board members or comments? Aaron.
What was the nature of the zone exemption to Christiana Middle School?
We live 4 miles from Christiana and about 18 miles from Rockville. So, At the time, my father-in-law was battling brain cancer, and we were, you know, trying to help him and my mother-in-law and trying to get the kids everywhere. So I have a zone exemption for there and at Christian Elementary.
The older sibling,
Yes,
what
sir.
school are they attending now?
Eagleville?
Okay.
Wayne,
Move to deny.
okay? Is there a second? Okay, motion dies for lack of a second. Is there another motion?
Second.
Discussion. Okay, a vote yes is a vote to approve, a vote no is a vote to deny, just so everybody is clear on that. You ready to vote? Okay, Ms. Michaels, call the roll, please.
Mr. Blair?
No.
Mr. Hodge?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Jernigan?
Yes.
Mr. Holliday?
Yes.
Mr. Tackett?
Yes.
Dr. Burns?
No.
Motion carries.
You have your exemption if you'll, I don't know, what do they need to do, James?
They'll get the actual board hearing order from me, and then they can use
Okay.
that to enroll their child at Oakland High School. Should get it in a couple of days. Thank you, Mayor. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Next, application, James?
Yes, sir. The next, the second appeal, the last appeal tonight are parents Kevin and Hope Oliver. Come up, please. They're requesting a zone exemption for their child to attend Oakland High School instead of Laverne High School. The student is an athlete, and Oakland High School has confirmed the student does not qualify for the International Baccalaureate program using the academic prerequisites adopted by the Board of Education.
Well, welcome to you all, and please feel free to have your say.
Good evening. Initially, when we made application for the zone waiver, it was not for IB. We do have a daughter at Oakland, and she's doing well as we have a son at Laverne who's not doing as well. So we wanted our we have two younger sons, so we wanted to get them into Oakland, into that environment, because my daughter is doing well academically. At any rate, our initial request was just for a straight zone waiver. And the letter we received basically stated that the Laverne principal recommended against it because my son has a sibling at Laverne High School, and the recommendation was that we apply to the IB program in order to get my son at Oakland. Well, once I looked at the criterion and it said that the student had to score at 80 percentile or above in 2 reporting areas, I went back and looked at my son's Explore scores and presented it that he does. Well, once I presented that, I was told that the 2 reporting areas had to be under the U.S. column, which that's not what was written in the guidelines. It just said 2 reporting areas. So when I looked at my son's score, he actually scored in 5 areas at 80% or above. So again, I presented that and was denied, and now here we are.
My understanding is the way the scores were reported, it shows how you did compared to the peers in your school, and then how you did, I believe it's on a state level. And the requirements are they have to be an 80 percentile with the state level, which is the same as for the magnet school. Mr. Spurlock did look over it and confirm that the child did not qualify under the prerequisite.
James, let me interrupt you. I mean, I'd say, given the action of the previous student, I'm going to change my recommendation, and I say we go in to prove it. I mean, we philosophically don't agree on this at all, and I don't see how we can deny these good people when we just approve the other one. So I don't even know if we need to hear it. I guess I can go back and just change the recommendation, can I? So I guess that means there's not even a need to vote on it. That's okay, Dr. Burns.
If that's your wish, that'll be fine.
So I'm going to go ahead and change it to yes.
Any board member object to that?
I don't have an objection, but I do have a question.
Chief?
I'm interested in the letter that I see here from Kelly Chastain, the International Baccalaureate Coordinator. as I read this, it basically says to me that he does qualify from her, and so there's some
confusion there, and that's why we had Mr. Spurlock look at it, because the student, my understanding is the student met the qualification in one of those 5 reporting areas in a subcategory, but not one of the 5 major reporting areas. And Mr. Spurlock looked over that again and said that that letter was not correct. It was more an opinion from Ms. Chastain, who's the IB coordinator, and that technically the child does not meet the standards. Now, with that being said, Mr. Spurlock said he'd love to have the student and thinks that Kyle Oliver is a great student. So, but technically the child does not qualify.
Just as a follow-up to that, take this student aside, if any student comes in and is very close to meeting IB standards, is it possible for them to, at some point in time, be qualified for the IB program at Oakland?
Potentially. I mean, they don't technically start the IB program until their junior year. You know, the school brought in these prerequisites before just as some sort of standards to adopt.
Mr. Gill, I'm not sure that even though the circumstances might not still vote, because my position is still what it was before, that, you know, over the years, this board has consistently denied these unless there was something really special in that situation. And to let this go without board approval, I you know, one way or the other, I don't know if that doesn't put you in an even more precarious position. I think what it does do is all those exemptions in the past that have been denied, you know, I think those people are going to be very resentful of us now that with this action tonight. So I would recommend that you just go ahead and let us vote and do what we will.
Although typically we wouldn't see it. If the director recommended it, we would not be voting on it anyway.
But I mean,
yeah, I know this is
here.
different.
Yeah, it's here.
Well, I'm pretty sure I know the outcome of the vote, but I mean, that's what
that just, you'll be voting against your director's recommendation in that situation. But
well, I don't want to do that unless he pulls.
Yeah.
So.
I see what you're saying, Wayne. I'm not sure I see the utility of doing that. So it depends on how strongly you feel.
Well, no, I'm not to that issue, but, you know, I am concerned about all those that we've denied in the past, you know, with compelling reasons. And at least they thought they were compelling reasons.
Well, I would piggyback that and say, you know, the board, and I say this respectfully, I really think we have worked hard to get students to go to their zone school, in particular athletes, because it does present a problem for those schools, and it does, to me, from my perspective, contribute to recruiting. And I think we have effectively set back the zoning process, and maybe I'm overreacting here, but I think we potentially have set a precedent and may have created a bit of a monster here, and probably set back the good work we've done over the past 8 years a little bit tonight, but hopefully I'm wrong there. But anyway, I want to stick with that and grant their zoning.
Okay, well, in that case, I don't see the need for a vote.
Yeah, I don't.
Mark, I just say, on the record, and I know this from experience while I was in Oakland, it's just as important that the band director gets the good kids too, as it is for the athletes. I know that's not on the front page of the paper, but, you know, good kids can be recruited, if that's the right word, in lots of other areas than that. So I just have a fundamental issue that we set aside one particular group, whether it's band students, honor roll students, athletes, or whatever, and make it whatever. I would have no problem if we pursue this further on to say it's not an open school, and I won't have any trouble denying the request. I think that would be the appropriate thing to do, but I just can't do it based upon the fact that someone's an athlete.
Okay, thank you all for coming. James, will you be sending them paperwork?
You'll get a letter from me in just a couple days, and then you can use that letter to get your child registered at Oakland, okay? If you have any questions, give me a shout.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I don't expect any more before the start of school. We haven't received any other requests, and we're about 2.5 weeks in the beginning of school. It's kind of on the, deadline's pretty
So
much
late.
over. So, there's always a chance if we do that we'll take it to a normal board meeting. Unless there's a lot of them, we'll do a special.
Okay.